I'm Mike, 34. I've been married to Stephanie, Steph, 31, for 8 years. We met through mutual friends back in college, and I was instantly smitten. Steph had this energy about her, bright, infectious, and she always seemed to light up every room she walked into. We had what I thought was a solid relationship. A year ago, tragedy struck. Our 6-year-old son, Liam, passed away after a long battle with leukemia. I can't even begin to describe the pain of losing him. It's like a part of me died with him. Steph and I grieved differently. I threw myself into therapy and work, trying to find ways to cope. Steph, on the other hand, seemed to retreat into herself. She became distant, cold even. I chalked it up to grief, thinking she needed time and space to heal. But then, little things started to feel off. First, it was small stuff. Steph started spending more time on her phone, always glued to it, even during dinner. When I'd glance over, she'd quickly lock the screen or tilt it away. I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, who doesn't scroll mindlessly these days? But then, she began disappearing for long stretches. Going to the store, she'd say, but she'd be gone for hours. When I asked where she'd been, she'd give vague answers. Oh, I ran into someone I know, or I just needed to clear my head. She started working late more often too, claiming her boss was demanding more of her. Again, I didn't question it. I figured it was her way of coping, keeping busy to avoid the gaping hole Liam's death left in our lives. One night, though, something strange happened. I woke up around midnight to find Steph wasn't in bed. I wandered downstairs, thinking she might be on the couch, but she wasn't there. I eventually found her in the backyard, sitting on the patio with her phone pressed to her ear. She jumped when she saw me. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just Lisa," she said quickly, naming her best friend. "She's going through something, and I didn't want to wake you." It sounded plausible, but the way she avoided my eyes planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Still, I pushed it aside. I didn't want to believe something could be wrong. Not after everything we'd been through. But that seed of doubt? It didn't go away. In fact, it started to grow. The real cracks began to show about 3 months ago. It was a Friday night, and Steph told me she was heading out to grab dinner with Lisa. Normally, I wouldn't think twice, but something felt off. Her outfit was different, more revealing than she'd typically wear for a casual hangout. And she spritzed on the perfume I bought her for our anniversary, the one she usually saved for special occasions. "Looking good," I teased, trying to keep the mood light, but she barely smiled. "Just dinner, right?" "Yeah," she replied quickly. Too quickly. She left, and for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Against my better judgment, I decided to check her location on our shared phone plan. I don't normally do this. I've always trusted her. But that night I felt compelled. Her location pinged at a hotel across town. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, trying to rationalize it. Maybe Lisa was meeting her there? Maybe it was a misunderstanding? I waited an hour, then drove over. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. When I got to the hotel parking lot, I didn't even know what I was doing there. I just sat. And then I saw her, Steph, walking out of the lobby with a man. It wasn't just any man. It was Eric, her ex-boyfriend. The one she always claimed was ancient history. They were laughing, and when they reached his car, she leaned in and kissed him. My world shattered in that moment. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just sat there watching my wife, the woman I'd stood by through the worst moments of our lives, betray me in the most soul-crushing way imaginable. I didn't confront her that night. I drove home, numb and shaking, and waited for her to come back. She walked in a couple of hours later, looking every bit the picture of innocence. "How was dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good," she said with a little smile. "Lisa and I had a great time." That was the first time I realized how easily she could lie to my face. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, laughing, kissing, living a life I wasn't part of. By morning, I decided I couldn't keep it bottled up. I needed answers, no matter how much it hurt. When Steph woke up, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. She walked in, looking groggy, and gave me a half-hearted good morning before reaching for the coffee pot. "Who is Eric to you?" I blurted out. She froze. Her back was to me, but I saw the way her shoulders tensed. After what felt like an eternity, she turned around, holding the coffee mug like a shield. "Why are you asking about him?" I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because I saw you with him last night, at the hotel." Her face went pale, but then, as if flipping a switch, she narrowed her eyes and said, "Were you following me?" Unbelievable. She was trying to turn this around on me. "Don't you dare!" I snapped, my voice finally cracking. "You lied to me. You said you were with Lisa." Steph crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "I was with Lisa. Eric was just there. It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" "Because what I think is that you've been sneaking around with your ex while I've been at home, grieving our son and trying to keep this marriage together. So go ahead, Steph. Explain to me how kissing him in a hotel parking lot is totally innocent." Her lip quivered, and for a brief moment, I thought she might come clean. Instead, she scoffed and said, "You're overreacting. I wasn't kissing him. I was saying goodbye. He's been helping me process everything with Liam." That hit me like a punch to the gut. "Helping you process?" I repeated. "And you couldn't talk to me? Your husband? The father of your son?" She set the coffee mug down with a sharp clink. "You don't get it. You've been so wrapped up in your own grief that you've barely noticed me. Eric, he listens. He understands." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. "Don't you dare blame this on me," I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. "I've been here, Steph. I've always been here. You're the one who pulled away. And instead of talking to me, you ran to him." At that point, she stopped trying to defend herself. She just stood there, arms crossed, her face a mask of defiance. "Believe what you want," she said coldly. "I'm not having this conversation." And with that, she walked out, leaving me sitting there, shaking with anger and heartbreak. After the confrontation, things between Steph and me were icy, to say the least. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was all clipped sentences and eye rolls. I thought maybe she'd show some remorse, apologize even, but no. Instead, she doubled down on the lies and acted like I was the problem for being upset. The following weekend, she said she was going to visit her mom in another town. I didn't believe her for a second, but I decided not to argue. Instead, I checked her location again after she left. Sure enough, she was back at the same hotel. This time, I wasn't going to sit in the parking lot and let her walk all over me. I decided to confront her there. When I arrived, I waited near the entrance until I saw her and Eric come out. They weren't holding hands or anything, but the way they walked together, so comfortable, so familiar, made my blood boil. I stepped out of my car and called her name. "Steph." She froze mid-laugh, her face turning a shade of white I didn't think was possible. Eric, to his credit, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mike," she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Funny," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was about to ask you the same thing. Thought you were at your mom's." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, she managed, "I was going to stop there after this." "After what?" I asked, glaring at Eric. "Your little rendezvous with him?" Eric held up his hands. "Look, man, this isn't what you think." "Oh, shut the hell up," I snapped, cutting him off. "You think I don't know what's been going on? I've seen you. I've heard the lies." Steph stepped between us, her voice rising. "Mike, you're making a scene." "A scene? You're damn right I'm making a scene," I shouted. "You've been sneaking around with this guy while I've been at home trying to keep our family together. How could you do this, Steph? How could you throw everything away?" Her eyes welled up, but not with regret. No, it was anger. "You think this is all on me? You've been emotionally checked out for months. I needed someone to talk to. someone who understood me. And that someone just had to be your ex? I shot back. Do you even hear yourself? At that point, Eric muttered something about not wanting to be involved in domestic drama and walked off, leaving Steph and me standing there. She looked at me with something I can only describe as disdain. Maybe if you weren't so controlling and paranoid, I wouldn't have needed to find comfort elsewhere. She spat. That was it. The final straw. I didn't say another word. I turned around, got in my car, and drove home. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I spent the next few days in a daze. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. Her lies, her excuses, they replayed in my head like a broken record. I was ready to file for divorce, to walk away and never look back. But then, something happened that threw everything into chaos. Steph came home late one evening, her face blotchy from crying. She walked in without a word and sat down on the couch. I was in the kitchen, trying to force down a bowl of cereal, and when I saw her, I froze. What now? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She didn't respond at first. Instead, she buried her face in her hands and let out a shaky breath. Mike, I need to tell you something. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Oh, this should be good. She looked up, and for the first time in months she seemed vulnerable. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a freight train. What? I said, my mind racing. I found out last week, she said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. And let me guess. I finally managed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. It's Eric's. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. No, she said quickly. It's yours, Mike. I swear. I laughed bitterly. You really expect me to believe that? After everything? I'm telling you the truth, she shouted, her voice cracking. I made a mistake with Eric, but I never slept with him. Not once. Why the hell should I believe you? I shot back. You've done nothing but lie to me for months. She stood up, her hands shaking. Because it's the truth, damn it. And I'm willing to take a paternity test to prove it. The room went silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the possibility that this baby, our baby, was a chance to fix what was broken. But the other part of me, the part that had been betrayed and humiliated, wasn't ready to let her off the hook. Fine, I said finally. We'll do the test. And if you're lying, Steph, I swear to God. I'm not lying, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. A few days later, I was at work when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Is this Mike? A man's voice asked when I picked up. Yeah, I said cautiously. Who's this? It's Eric. I almost dropped the phone. What the hell do you want? I thought you should know, he said, his tone serious. Steph isn't who you think she is. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped. There was a long pause before he spoke again. She's been lying to both of us, man. She told me the baby might be mine. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? I didn't want to believe it either, Eric said. But I think you deserve to know. She's been playing us both. I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep my grip on the phone. Steph had sworn up and down that the baby was mine. But if Eric was telling the truth, that night, I confronted her again, and this time I wasn't holding back. That night, I stormed into the house like a man on fire. Steph was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing was wrong. Seeing her so calm, so nonchalant, made my blood boil. We need to talk, I said sharply. She looked up, startled by the tone in my voice. What's going on? I got a call today, I said, pacing the room. From Eric. Her face immediately drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. He told me everything, Steph. About the baby. About how you told him it might be his. That's not true, she yelled, standing up and throwing her phone on the coffee table. He's lying, Mike. He's trying to ruin us. "Oh, really?" I shot back. "So now he's the liar? Because, last I checked, you're the one who's been sneaking around and lying to my face for months." She hesitated, her hands shaking. "I only told him that because I didn't know what else to say. He wouldn't leave me alone, Mike. I just wanted him to go away." "You told another man he might be the father of your child," I said, my voice cracking with rage. "Do you have any idea how messed up that is? Do you even realize what you've done?" Tears streamed down her face, but I wasn't buying the act anymore. She always cried when she got caught, but this time I wasn't falling for it. "I was scared," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I didn't want to lose you, Mike." "Lose me?" I laughed bitterly. "Steph, you already lost me the moment you decided to run back to your ex instead of dealing with your grief with me. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed our son's memory. Do you even care about Liam? Or was this all about you?" Her face twisted with anger. "Don't you dare bring Liam into this. You think you're the only one grieving. I lost him too. And this is how you chose to cope?" I yelled. "By dragging Eric back into our lives? By lying to me over and over again?" She sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, the room was silent except for her muffled sobs. Then, she looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I'll take the paternity test," she said quietly. "I'll prove to you that the baby is yours. But, Mike, you have to give me another chance." I stared at her, my heart heavy with a mix of anger, sadness, and exhaustion. "You don't get to make demands, Steph. Not after this." She nodded, defeated, and for once, she didn't argue. But the damage was done. Even if the baby turned out to be mine, I wasn't sure I could ever look at her the same way again. What came next was something I wasn't prepared for, because, as it turned out, the lies ran even deeper than I thought. The week leading up to the paternity test was unbearable. I avoided Steph as much as possible, sleeping in the guest room and keeping our conversations to the bare minimum. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with had become a stranger. A manipulative, deceitful stranger. The day of the test came, and we drove to the clinic in tense silence. Steph tried to make small talk, but I wasn't having it. After the samples were taken, they told us it would take about a week to get the results. A week of waiting. A week of wondering if my marriage, my life, and my future were built on lies. But the bombshell didn't wait for the test results. 2 days later, while Steph was at work, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a long, rambling text from someone claiming to be Eric's ex-girlfriend, Megan. She said she'd found my number through mutual friends and thought I deserved to know the truth. According to her, Eric and Steph had been in contact for far longer than I realized. It didn't start after Liam's death. It started months before. Steph had apparently reached out to Eric under the guise of reconnecting as friends. But their conversations quickly turned emotional and, eventually, romantic. Megan even attached screenshots of texts between Eric and Steph as proof. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages. They weren't just flirty, they were deeply intimate. Steph had shared things with Eric she hadn't even told me, including details about our marriage and my struggles with grief. One message stood out like a dagger to the heart. "Eric, do you ever regret marrying him?" "Steph, sometimes. He's a good man, but I don't feel alive with him anymore." I dropped the phone, my vision blurred by tears. This wasn't just an affair of convenience or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. When Steph came home that night, I confronted her with the texts. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I showed her the screenshots, her face crumpled. "It wasn't what it looked like," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't start anything until after Liam." "Don't you dare lie to me again," I roared, slamming my hand on the table. "You've lied enough, Steph. Just admit it." Her tears turned to anger. "Fine," she snapped. "Yes, I reached out to him before Liam died. But it was just talking, Mike. I was lonely, and you were so consumed by work and therapy and, so it's my fault?" I cut in, my voice rising. It's my fault you ran back to your ex and poured your heart out to him instead of your husband? She looked away, her arms crossed, and for the first time, I saw her for what she really was. Selfish, manipulative, and unwilling to take responsibility for her actions. You're disgusting, I said, my voice cold. You've destroyed everything. And for what? Some nostalgia trip with Eric? I made a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now. But we can fix this, Mike. We can go to counseling, start over. There's no starting over, I said, cutting her off. We're done, Steph. Whether the baby is mine or not, I'm done with you. Her face crumpled, but I didn't care anymore. For the first time in months, I felt clear-headed. I wasn't going to let her lies control me any longer. The results of the paternity test were still looming, but at that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I was done being her fool. The day the paternity results came in, I was a mess. Part of me hoped the baby was mine. It would mean that at least one part of my life wasn't a complete lie. But the other part? It dreaded the possibility. If the baby was Eric's, it would be the nail in the coffin of my marriage. When the email arrived from the clinic, I opened it alone. I couldn't face Steph yet. My hands trembled as I scanned the document until I found the words that changed everything. Probability of paternity. 99.99%. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deep, lingering sadness. The baby was mine. But did that even matter now? The person I'd once trusted most in the world had destroyed that trust beyond repair. I called Steph into the living room and handed her the printed results. She read them, her face a mix of relief and triumph. See? She said, tears in her eyes. I told you, Mike. It's our baby. We can fix this. But I wasn't ready to let her rewrite the narrative. Fix what, Steph? I snapped. You think these results magically erase everything you've done? The lies? Eric? The months you've spent betraying me? This doesn't fix anything. She sat down, crying harder now. I don't know what else to say, she sobbed. I messed up, but I love you, Mike. I love us. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I needed air, space, anything but her. As I drove aimlessly around town, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan, Eric's ex. Megan, did you get the results? Is the baby yours? I texted back a simple, yes. Her reply came a few minutes later, and it nearly drove me off the road. Megan, I thought so. I just found something else you need to see. She attached a screenshot of an email thread between Eric and Steph. It was dated from 2 weeks ago, after our confrontation, after she'd sworn she was done with him. In it, they were planning to meet up again, just to talk. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I called Megan immediately. She's still in contact with him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought you should know, Megan said, her voice sympathetic. She's been lying to both of us. Eric told me they never stopped talking, even after you found out. I hung up, my heart pounding. When I got home, Steph was sitting on the couch, looking hopeful, like she thought we might finally have a chance to work things out. You're still talking to him, I said, throwing my phone onto the coffee table with Megan's screenshots pulled up. Steph's face went pale. Mike, it's not what you think. Don't, I interrupted. Just don't. I don't want to hear another word from you. She started crying again, but I was done. I packed a bag that night and left. I didn't tell her where I was going, and I didn't care. I knew then that this marriage was beyond saving. The day I left, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family. I just needed to be alone. For the first time in months, the silence felt like a relief instead of a punishment. Steph called and texted incessantly at first. Her messages ranged from begging for forgiveness to accusing me of overreacting. Then came the threats to ruin my life if I didn't come back, followed by more pleading. I didn't respond to a single one. A week later, I got a call from my lawyer. I'd reached out to him after leaving to start the divorce process. and he had news. "Steph has been served," he said. "But there's one more thing you should know." Apparently, she'd hired her own lawyer and was fighting to keep the house and full custody of the baby, claiming I was mentally unfit due to my grief over Liam. Hearing that nearly broke me. After everything I'd been through, after everything she had done, she was now trying to paint me as the bad guy. Fast forward a few weeks, and things escalated. She started spreading lies to mutual friends, saying I'd abandoned her while she was pregnant, that I was cold and uncaring. Some people believed her. Others saw through her manipulative behavior. I stayed quiet, refusing to stoop to her level. Then came the moment that changed everything, the custody hearing. I'd been preparing for the worst, expecting Steph to pull every dirty trick in the book. And she did. She cried on the stand, talked about how I'd checked out after Liam's death, and painted herself as the victim in every possible way. But what she didn't count on was my lawyer introducing the screenshots. All of them. The texts to Eric. The emails. The proof that she'd been lying and manipulating everyone, including the court. When the judge ruled in my favor for shared custody, Steph's mask finally slipped. She stood up in the courtroom and screamed at me, at the judge, at her own lawyer. It was like watching the last thread of her composure snap. It's been 3 months since that day. The divorce is finalized, and I've moved into a small apartment. The baby was born last week, a beautiful little girl named Emma. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what co-parenting with Steph will look like, but for now, I'm focusing on being the best father I can be. As for Steph and Eric, she tried running back to him after the divorce, but from what I hear, he's already moved on. I guess even he couldn't handle the full extent of her chaos. Conclusion: what I've learned. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. I ignored so many red flags because I wanted to believe in the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. But grief changes people, it brings out their true selves. And sometimes those selves are unrecognizable. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone reading this, it's this: trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never let anyone make you feel crazy for wanting honesty and respect in a relationship. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and being there for Emma. It's not the life I imagined, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of it. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.